All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty fundamental to how our vehicles actually feel and behave out there on the road.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the chassis, or you might know it as the, how do you say that? Fair work. I always get that wrong.
Fair work. Yeah.
Fair work, yeah.
Yeah.
Which you'll see a lot in, like technical documentation, like the document1.pdf you sent over.
Yeah, exactly. You've given us a really great jumping off point with that.
Yeah.
Really want to unpack this system, help everyone listening get a better understanding of just what's at play beneath the surface, when you're driving your car.
Yeah, like what is connecting the body of the car to the wheel?
Yes.
It's not just like magic,
I
right?
know, not at
There's
all.
stuff going on there.
And it's a lot more than just like a passive connector.
Right.
I mean, you can think of it, as the source lays out, like it dictates how the car handles, how comfortable the ride is, ultimately how well it interacts with the road.
Right.
So that's what we're going to try to unpack today. So those key functions and then those parameters that really define how the chassis performs.
Yeah, yeah. So let's jump into it, right?
Mhm.
So document1.pdf calls out, a couple of functions. We can start with stability and traction. Like what does that even mean, right? Like how is the chassis helping with that?
Right. So it's really all about how well had engine power gets transmitted to the road and how well the tires stay in contact with the surface, particularly, when you're driving dynamically, cornering or accelerating. And a big part of that is proper wheel alignment, right?
Right.
Making sure all four tires are sort of, working in harmony as they should be. And document1.pdf emphasizes this is critical for stability, particularly at speed and when you're driving through curves. If your wheels aren't aligned, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel a lack of control in the car.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So it's all about making sure those tires are staying in contact with the road.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, maximizing that contact batch.
Right. Okay. And then, the second function, damping shocks and dealing with uneven road surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we get into the comfort factor, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Like I want to be comfortable when I'm, cruising on the highway or whatever.
exactly. So think about driving over a pothole, right? I mean, if you didn't have a properly designed chassis to deal with that, every impact, every vibration would be transmitted directly into the cabin.
Right.
Not comfortable. And it would cause a lot of stress and wear and tear on the vehicle.
Right.
So the chassis, through its, shock absorbers and other elements, really acts like a buffer.
Mm-hmm.
It cushions you from those vertical movements that the road throws at you.
Right.
And as your source lays out, this not only protects the car itself, but it improves the experience for everyone inside.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Much smoother, more pleasant drive.
For sure. For sure. Okay, steering behavior control. This sounds like it's all about, how connected you are to the road when you turn the wheel and
Yeah, exactly. It's how the vehicle actually responds to your inputs as a driver. And document1.pdf emphasizes the importance of precise wheel guidance. If you don't have that, if the geometry isn't set up right, the car's not going to react predictably when you try to steer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's about, having that framework where the wheels turn exactly as they should, consistently.
Right, right.
So the car goes where you want it to go. You don't want to have that vague or, unresponsive feeling.
Right. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. All right. And the fourth function we wanted to touch on was driving comfort and passenger comfort, which kind of ties in with that, damping that we were talking about before.
Exactly, yeah. It's all about trying to minimize that, noise, vibration, harshness, all those things that you don't want to feel in the car.
Right.
It's trying to keep that from the road, from getting into the car, into the cabin.
Right, right.
And the source highlights what a balancing act this is.
Mm-hmm.
You want suspension and damping system that's compliant enough to deal with the bumps and give you a smooth ride. But at the same time, you don't want it to be so soft that the car is like wallowing around in the corners, right?
Oh, right.
So it's about finding that really fine balance.
Right. Okay. So we've talked about what the chassis does, what its functions are. Let's get into how it actually does these things.
Right.
We'll talk about some key parameters, or I'm going to butcher this again, but Kenngrößen,
Yeah.
Kenngrößen, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
as document1.pdf puts it.
Exactly.
So let's start with suspension and suspension travel, or Federung and Federweg.
Federweg. Yes, Federweg.
Federweg.
Yeah, and that one's, really insightful because what it means is how much can the wheel actually travel up and down,
Okay.
right? Before the suspension uh, reaches its limit, you can think of it as like the amount of breathing room the wheel has to move.
Okay.
So more travel generally means a vehicle can handle rougher terrain.
Oh, okay.
Right. Absorb larger impacts. Like you think about a rugged off-road vehicle versus like a sporty little car, you need a lot more travel to soak up those big bumps when you're off-road.
Right. That makes sense. Like you're saying, if I'm driving a sports car, I don't need as much suspension travel because I'm probably not going to be going over huge bumps, right?
Well, exactly. And, like the source notes, there's a trade-off.
Okay.
Because shorter suspension travel can actually give you that really direct, sporty, connected feeling on the road with less body roll. So it really comes down to, what the vehicle is designed for. Like a longer travel, you're prioritizing that comfort and off-road capability.
Right.
Shorter travel, you're thinking more about, how does it handle on paved surfaces, the agility and responsiveness.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Next we got damping or Dämpfung.
Dämpfung, yeah.
Dämpfung. We talked a bit about shock absorbers earlier, but what else should we know about damping?
Yeah, so those shock absorbers, they're what's really responsible for the damping. And what they do is they take that kinetic energy from the suspension movement and they convert it into heat,
Okay.
which effectively helps control those oscillations from the spring.
Okay.
So if you imagine hitting a bump, right, that spring compresses, but then the shock absorber's job is to make sure it doesn't just keep bouncing up and down uncontrollably.
Oh, okay.
It helps to bring the wheel back to a stable position nice and quickly.
So it's really controlling that bouncing.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. And then document 1.pdf talks about Dämpferkennlinie, the damper characteristic curve.
Right.
What is that exactly?
Yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But it's essentially describing how much resistance the shock absorber provides at different speeds of movement.
Okay.
So think about it like the resistance you feel on a door with a hydraulic closer, right? You push it open, it resists, and then it slowly closes.
Right.
So a steeper curve means the damper is going to give you more resistance even at slower speeds.
Okay.
And that can result in a firmer ride, but also a more controlled ride. Whereas a flatter curve, that might be a bit more comfortable over those small bumps, but might not feel as controlled when you're really pushing the car.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's another one of those balancing acts, right?
Exactly. And it's another thing engineers spend a lot of time fine-tuning, really trying to get that sweet spot.
Right. Okay. All right. So moving on, camber or spurts.
Sturts, yeah.
Sturts. This one's about the torse of the wheels, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what are the implications of camber? Like, why is it important?
So when you're looking at the car head-on or from the rear, camber's all about the angle of the wheel relative to that vertical axis.
Okay.
And document 1.pdf does a good job explaining the two main types. So negative camber, that's when the top of the wheel tilts inwards towards the center of the car.
Okay.
And, the document mentions this being commonly used in sports cars.
Mm-hmm.
To give you better grip when you're going through those corners. And the way it works is, picture yourself going around a bend, right?
Mm-hmm.
The weight of the car shifts to the outside. The body leans out.
Right.
Which actually, without camber, would cause the tires to lift a bit, especially on the outer edge.
Right.
And you'd lose some of that contact with the road. But that negative camber, it helps the tire maintain, a more optimal contact patch because it's already tilted in.
So as the car leans out, it's almost like it straightens up the wheel, right?
Right, exactly. You can think of it like a motorcycle leaning into a turn, It helps to stay more planted, provides better grip.
Okay. So negative camber, you're leaning in, more grip, good for, going fast around those turns.
Yeah, exactly. And this is but too much negative camber can actually increase tire wear because when you're driving straight, you're mostly running on that inner edge of the tire.
Oh, okay. So too much of a good thing, right?
Exactly.
Can be a bad thing. All right. So then positive camber, that's where the wheel is tilted outwards.
Mm-hmm.
Our source says it's less common. Why is that?
Yeah, positive camber, it definitely has its place, but it's, a bit more specialized. The document points to applications like heavy-duty vehicles or off-road vehicles where it can help with load bearing.
Okay.
But in terms of general driving, It doesn't give you as good of a grip in corners, and it tends to wear the outer edge of the tires more.
Okay, so it's a design choice for very specific needs.
Right, exactly.
All right. Next we got caster or Nachlauf.
Nachlauf, yeah.
Nachlauf. This one sounds like it really affects how the steering feels.
It does, yeah. So caster, or the caster angle, it's the angle between the steering axis of that front wheel and the vertical axis.
Okay.
And a positive caster angle, document 1.pdf explains this really well. It helps the steering wheel want to naturally return to center after you've turned it.
Oh, okay.
So that, you finish a turn, let go of the wheel a bit, and it straightens out.
Right, right.
That's positive caster working.
Okay, that's what that is. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, it's one of the things we take for granted until it's not working right.
Right.
And the document also mentions that it helps with stability, particularly at higher speeds, that straight line stability.
Right.
And also, it can improve the feel of the steering in front-wheel drive cars because it just gives you a bit more stability and predictability.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, next up we got toe or spur.
Spur, yeah.
Spur. The document describes it in terms of the horizontal distance between the wheels.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does that mean? What does that mean for how the car drives?
So imagine looking at the car from above, right? Toe is all about the direction those wheels are pointing compared to the direction the car's traveling in. So positive toe in, that's when the front of the wheels are angled slightly inwards.
Okay.
And document 1.pdf notes this is often used to improve stability, especially at higher speeds. It makes the car feel a bit more planted.
Okay.
But the trade-off here is that, those tires are basically scrubby against the road a bit, so you can get more wear on the outer edges.
Oh, right.
Then you have negative toe out,
Okay.
where the front of the wheels point slightly outwards. Now, this can actually make the steering feel a bit more responsive, sharper.
Okay.
But again, there's a trade-off because now you're increasing the wear on the inner edges of the tire, particularly when you're driving in a straight line.
Right, so you're getting a little bit better steering response.
Yeah.
But the trade-off is you're wearing out your tires.
Exactly. So it's all about getting those tiny adjustments just right.
Okay. Fascinating stuff. All right, last but not least, we have wheel suspension itself. Radafhängung.
Radafhängung, yeah.
Radafhängung.
You got it.
I think I got it.
You're getting better.
Document1.pdf actually mentions a couple of types, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are those, and what impact do those different designs have?
Right. So that wheel suspension, it's the whole system that connects the wheels to the chassis, the linkages, the components, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it's designed really dictates how the wheels move, how they interact with the body, and how those forces from the road get transmitted.
Okay.
So the document talks about the McPherson strut, which is a very common design, especially for front suspensions.
Okay.
And it's pretty simple. It's compact. The strut itself actually handles the springing, the damping, and it's also a structural part of the steering system.
So that would be something you'd see more in like a mass-produced vehicle.
Yeah, a lot of your everyday cars use that just because it's cost effective and it doesn't take up a ton of space.
Right. And then there's the double wishbone suspension, right?
Yes, the double wishbone. This is where things get a bit fancier.
Okay.
It uses two separate control arms, like wishbones, to locate the wheel, and then a separate spring and shock absorber.
Okay.
So it's a bit more complex.
Right, and our sources, that's what you'd see in a higher performance cars or sports cars.
Yep, exactly.
Why is that? What's the advantage of that more complex setup?
So the big advantage with the double wishbone is the level of control you get over the wheel movement as it compresses, as it rebounds. So engineers can actually fine-tune how that tire stays in contact with the road even when you're really pushing the car.
Right.
Which means better handling, particularly in corners and on uneven surfaces. It's just a much more sophisticated approach.
So it's a lot better at handling those forces, like when you're accelerating, braking, turning.
Yeah, all of that, both longitudinal and lateral forces.
Okay, so yeah, it's more expensive, but you get better handling, and that's why you see it in performance vehicles.
Precisely. For a normal car, it's probably overkill, but when performance is a priority, it's definitely worth it.
So it's really interesting how the way the wheels are actually connected to the car really has this huge impact on how the vehicle feels, how it behaves on the road.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Choosing what type of suspension to use is a fundamental decision when you're designing a car. It really shakes the whole driving experience.
Okay, so to recap, the chassis is this integrated system that's crucial for stability, comfort, and control. And then you have these key parameters, the suspension travel, damping, camber, caster toe, and of course the wheel suspension design. And that's what engineers are working with to fine-tune the car's performance, to create a specific driving experience.
Exactly. And, document1.pdf emphasizes that this is all about balance, right? So
Hmm.
if you have a sports car, you're going to want a stiffer suspension, more aggressive wheel alignment to prioritize that sharp, responsive handling.
Right, you want that connected to the road feel.
Exactly. Whereas, if you're driving more of a comfort-oriented car, in an SUV, for example, you're going to have a softer setup.
Right.
Prioritize absorbing those jumps, giving you a smoother ride. So these parameters, they're carefully chosen based on what the vehicle is designed to do and who's going to be driving it.
So it's pretty amazing when you think about all the stuff that's happening under the car that
Mm-hmm.
we never really think about.
Yep.
But it's all affecting how the car performs, how it feels.
It's one of those things, once you start learning about it, it's like a whole new world opens up.
Right, right.
And it gives you this whole new appreciation for the engineering that goes into it.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess when we think about all these things, all these different parameters that were talked about, how much suspension travel, how's the damping tuned, the angle of the wheels with that camber, caster toe, and then the whole design of the wheel suspension. How much do you think this differs between, you've got a sports car, your SUV, how does that differ? And then on top of that, how much of it comes down to personal preference and, the type of roads you're usually driving on? What do you think?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question, and I think it really gets to the heart of the challenges that automotive engineers face, right? Trying to design that perfect chassis,
Right.
that perfect blend of comfort, performance, and culpability. It's a tall order, but they're constantly pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's definitely something to think about the next time you're behind the wheel. What compromises were made in your car's design, and how would you change things if you could?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Something to think about for sure.
for sure.
All right, well, we'll leave it there for today.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
See you next time.